Alright, class, this is going to be an update for the zonation tutorial. So if you look at the zonation tutorial that Pix has, if you look up here in the top left, you'll notice that they only have index and zonation as options inside the version of Pix4D they're running. Where the version we have now has index, the magic tool, and then operations. So you're going to actually have to work through operations to do this. I'm going to run through essentially what they do. It's going to be a little bit different. There's a lot more options now. And kind of show you what this is. So they're working off this NDVI, and they have the mask one, but I don't have it masked, but you can get the same result from this. It's where they've masked out the roads and all that stuff, right? You did it in the previous one. So just work off the ones you've been building from the previous ones, and they go through and they end up making, I'm going to skip ahead, right? So they're making 3 zones, and they're looking at NDRE, and they're looking at putting out nitrogen in these 3 zones. And so the lower the NDRE, the more nitrogen they want to put out. And they basically just have a red scale. You can have whatever color scale, it doesn't matter. When you put it into your sprayer, or whatever the applicator is, it really doesn't matter. So the ultimate goal here is they're actually wanting to do an operation. And I think that's why they changed this a little more intuitive, is your goal here is to do some sort of spraying, herbicide, nitrogen, or like fertilizer, whatever it may be. And so that is an actual operation. So they're going from the standpoint of you're trying to complete an operation. Zonation is going to be a step in that process of making an operational map that you can export and submit. All right, so we're going to run through this and just get some stuff. It's not going to match exactly what they have. I'm not too worried about it, just because, well, we can write these down. We can try to match them the best we can for this. So they've got, we'll take note of these. They've got a 330 kilogram per hectare, 222, and 111. So just splitting it by thirds. All right. Either way, really just want you to go through this process on how you make these. All right. You're going to be looking at your content-specific courses on what you would put in these. I'm not going to give you recommendations. They go through and they talk about this. And then ultimately they export this. Where's the export at? I think they export it as a shapefile right here. And they do this, I talked about export as a shape, as individual files, or as a zip. I think I said do it as a zip. That's not an option anymore. You have to do the individual files, and you can zip them if you want to. But we're gonna get it exported, and you'll see it. And I'll show you how to either zip it so you can get it submitted, or we'll give the single image that you can upload, make it a little bit simpler for you. This is where you'd have to look at what piece of equipment you're running and what you'd need to upload. All right, so I'm going to jump over here to Pix, and if you look, I have my NDRE here. All right, I have that turned on. I've already kind of masked it over here so it doesn't include this. I'm going to go to Operations, Zonation, Continue. My layer is going to be the NDRE. We're going to leave our boundary on even though it's clipped to that. It's not a big deal. We don't have any obstacles. Just kind of neat. You can put obstacle boundaries in there, and it'll leave that out of the analysis. And you'll see there's the steps, right? 1 through 7. We're going to go through these, change a few things as we go through this. All right. If we want to match, you can leave it on gallons per acre if you've already done that. No big deal. If you want to do pounds per acre, which they have the tutorials on kilograms per acre. Let's just leave it as gallons per acre. We'll leave it at gallons per acre. We'll come up with some generic numbers. You can name it if you want to, like if you want to call it, fertilizer spraying or something like that. You can hit next. All right. This is where you can adjust stuff. So it's gonna put a grid. If you zoom in, you can look at this grid on here, and so that's a 10 by 10 grid. The default may be a little bit smaller. The bigger you make this, right, the more pixels that go into averaging this grid. So if we zoom in on just this one, it's going to basically take the average of all the pixels in there, and that's what's going to define us our rate, and it's going to tell us where we fall in these zones that we make. All right. So if you make them too big, you're including too many pixels. If we go this big, you can see the grid's pretty large, especially as you get to these other parts of the field. Kind of here in the middle, you've got a lot going on here where this is not enough detail. If you go too small, we go really, really small, go back to the edge, and we zoom in, they're very small, right? There's only 4 pixels going into each one of these grids. This concept here of the pixels and identifying information, this kind of gets into the crop scouting stuff. But anyways, we want to be somewhere in between. I'm going to put it at 10. A lot of this will have to do with what kind of resolution you have and the equipment that you're using, like your sprayer and stuff like that. All right. You can also adjust the rotation. You'll see that changes the direction of the grid. All right. You can do horizontal offset. All right. So slide that back and forth. And the reason you may want to do this is if you're spraying, you have a spray drone, and you want to line up on trials, you can actually turn this and get that lined up right on those trials, like right on the edge of the road. Like if you didn't want to do the road at all, you could actually take the entire road out, because you'll notice they're in this nice line here as you rotate this stuff. But we're not going to worry about it. We're going to reset everything. Leave your grid size, your cell size at 10 feet. That's 10 by 10. Everything else is at 0. It's fine for what we're doing. We're going to go to the next one. All right, so on 5, this is important. This is where we're setting the boundary edges of our histogram, and what we want to include in this. If we step back and look at the whole field, as we change the bounds, we see cells go blank. All right, that means they would be getting a 0 rate. But if we make it too wide, we don't see very much variability across this field. And we want to see a decent amount of variability. And we know we basically have essentially 3 zones here, right? We have this eastern side of the field is kind of northeastern side is worse than the center part, where we have this south kind of western side of the field essentially is better. We're already seeing kind of the natural one. So we want to be able to see that in the coloring. So when we get to the zones, we can try to make 3 distinct zones in there. So I'm going to leave it about in these settings here. But we can fill in these blank ones knowing that that's bad if we need to. All right. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. So somewhere around in there. Play around with it. You should already start to be able to visualize the zones that you're wanting. This is where it's actually making the grids and applying them. And this is the minimum visible pixels per cell. We're going to leave the default setup. Hit next. All right, and now we're into the actual zone. So this looks a lot like the tutorial that's on YouTube, where you have the zones. It defaults to 5 zones. All right, you'll see there's a lot of little miscellaneous zones in here. Let's change this to 3 zones. All right, we're going to leave it as index on the mean. You can mess around with this detail. In general, I like to push this up a little bit higher, so we're getting rid of all these individual ones. All right. If you go too high, though, you're losing. What it does is it's basically averaging around them. So we may want something a little bit more like this, where we know we've got a bad streak here we need to deal with. And we can deal with these little 2 pixels kind of on their own later on, so that they're not messing up the spray stuff. So let's say we put it somewhere around in this realm, like that one. That looks pretty good. 3 zones. You can mess with the histogram on the right, but I'll be honest, from what I've noticed, changing stuff over here doesn't seem to change the output layer. The default, whatever you set on step 5 for your histogram, seems to be the output. So we may actually see some slight differences between what we're looking at here and what we get on our output, just because there seems to be a little bit of a glitch in the software, and maybe it'll work a little bit different for you when you're going through that process. All right, so we're good here. We're fine with these zones. These are just the zones. We haven't applied a rate to them. Create operation layer. All right, so now it kept what we had. We kept our 3 zones. We created that, right? We can turn our layer now on and off. We're back to our standard one. And then this is where you can put your rates in. Now let's just assume that this red rate, we needed more nitrogen. We'll put this at 15 gallons per acre, and 10, and 5. And that kind of matches up. They had it set up from a 111 to 222 to 333. So they're just bumping it up, broken up into thirds. All right, before we finish though, down here we have these tools, and it's helpful to clean stuff. It depends on what kind of equipment you have. If you have that kind of resolution where you can spray on a 10 foot by 10 foot grid, maybe you don't need to change anything. But there's a lot of these miscellaneous cells and areas that just don't seem to be right. So I'm going to go to my paint tool. And as you do this, as you hover, you can see this tool here show up. And so we can click through the different rates. We can actually add a rate if you wanted to, but we can click through them. And let's deal with this green down here, right? There's a lot of miscellaneous green. Maybe it should just be yellow or something like that. So let's actually fix the yellow. It's the middle rate. So if we do this, as we click, we can paint out these different ones. And so like this whole field boundary, it just all needs to be yellow. So we're going to go through here and change all that so that those work out pretty well. right? This should just all be yellow. There's no reason to have that low red there. All right, the same for this little corner here. All right, and if you're curious, and I think it was in one of the other ones, you can actually do the swiper so you can see, like, okay, I'm concerned, which I want to do split like this. So if you're not sure, like, oh, that green rate, like how much of this should be in that lower rate versus the upper rate. And it depends on what your goal is. If you're doing fertilizer, you may want to be conservative and say, I'm going to leave as much of that yellow as possible so it's getting the full rate. And like this right here, it's saying that needs a lower rate because it's a lot greener, but it's kind of surrounded by this. So maybe we don't want that in there at all. Or you got to kind of pick and choose, especially you get down to this corner and get down to that corner. If you need to, you always click back on the little arrow to drag yourself around. You get down this corner and you kind of swipe back and forth. Like, yeah, that's not worth having that green in there. Let's make all that yellow. All right, so just paint that right out. And then I'm going to go in and fix my green. Any of these little spots here, I'm going to just go ahead and kind of round all these out. There's no reason to have that yellow in the middle here. Let's just go ahead and fix some of those. And you can go through here and clean all this up. Maybe you just want to change all that to green, or you want to be like, no, I want to make sure I get plenty of fertilizer in here. So I'm going to get rid of these. Kind of finish this one out here. And it does not have to look just like mine, right? We're just kind of going through this process of cleaning this up a little bit. A lot of this depends on what kind of equipment you're running. Right? If you have the control, you don't need to do this. But if you're doing like a large sprayer that's like a 12-row sprayer, you need to think about something like that. All right, let's deal with our red up here. If we look at what we got on the red side, where do we need to add red? This whole strip is pretty red. All right, obviously there's some issues there. It's just showing a little bit of it. I'm going to go in here and just make all this red. Let's give it a little bit more nitrogen in all this. Let's just go ahead and fill this corner in here. All right, so that looks pretty good there. Might as well start the field with it. Let's just make all of that. And you've got some here. We may want to do this and go ahead and connect it. We got that there. Right, not too bad. Not too bad. Maybe we got a little bit of a strip here. So we can actually go in there and fix those and change them if you want to. All right. So now we actually have 3 zones. If we're satisfied with this, we can close our compare tool. We see now we have our actual zones here. We have our rates tied with these, our acreage, all that kind of stuff in this. All right. Now we can go ahead and you can fill in empty cells, stuff like that if you want to. But we're going to go ahead here and export. And in this case, it's just showing everything that you can export. And we're going to go to operations. Let's talk about RTK. This is where you see all the different drones. We're going to do generic tractor sprayer. And let's make this simple. Go ahead and do GeoTIFF. That way there's one file to upload to make your life a little bit easier on the upload side. You can do a shapefile, which you put on most of your tractor monitors. But we're going to do a GeoTIFF. Hit continue. All this stuff looks good. You can hit export. I'm going to put it in my downloads for right now. Alright, so it did it. If we go, it put it into this folder called tutorial, which is the name of your project. Open. And if you go to RX, there's our actual file. You can open this and look at it if you want to. It's not very exciting. You're going to see 3 very faint white zones in here. You can see the different zones. Very white over here, slightly gray, a little bit grayer. Those are our 3 zones. All right, that's all a GeoTIFF does. Is it just takes those pixels and assigns that 15, the 10, the 5 to those, and then your monitor can read those out. All right, it is spatially tied to those though. And so you can go ahead, for this one, you'll be good. You can upload this particular file. It should be good. All right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of clarity on the zonation and operations. Really the goal of the zonation is to take this and make it an operational map where you can go spray or spread or do whatever you want it to do. And so they put that into operations. So you can get something like this out of it.